Hello and welcome to the Crane Bag Podcast. I am your host, Jay Leeming, and I am in Greece. This is a podcast exploring the stories, myths, fairy tales, folk tales, and epics of the world. But this particular podcast is a little different. I don't have a traditional story for you. I don't have some wild and interesting epic. This is simply a reflection on my storytelling journey through Cyprus and Greece in the last 2 months of 2025. It's been an amazing journey, and I wanted to share some of those insights with you. Thank you for being here. Let us begin. My journey began in the country of Cyprus, in the far eastern side of the Mediterranean, a country in the Middle East. That became abundantly clear to me once I got there. It was hot. It was hot, and it was exotic and different. And the reason for this whole trip is I had some storytelling performances. I was invited, wonderfully so, to tell stories from the Odyssey in Cyprus, also in Thessaloniki, a city, the second largest city in Greece. So that's why I was there, and I decided to extend the trip and to really dig into this country and to explore this culture out of which so many amazing stories come. So doing that, it's a funny feeling. And the first insight, the first lesson, the first bang in the face thing I have felt when coming here is this wake-up call of just looking around and seeing where you are and feeling a bit like someone who is using a map several thousand years out of date. I came here, others have come here, filled with Greek mythology. Athena, Zeus, Poseidon, all right, Hermes. I know all about this place. I have the map. I know what to expect. And then you get there, and of course, it is different. It's a modern country. It's 2025. What are you going to find? There aren't going to be centaurs running around. I didn't expect that. I told myself I knew this was a real modern place, but nevertheless, it is something of a shock to be in Greece and in Cyprus and to see that, well, it's totally alive and it's smartphone crazy and mopeds and ferocious traffic and giant billboards and I mean, I don't know what I was expecting. I've lived in Europe. I lived in Austria for a year. I've been in a lot of other countries in Europe. I've traveled to Indonesia. You'd think I wouldn't have fallen for that, but there's just some little thing. This Fantasyland image of other places, be that Greece, be that Italy, be that wherever, Africa, we get these stereotypes in our heads and it's sort of a fantasy land. And these illusions die hard. They say when you plan a journey, you own the journey. And once you set out on that journey, the journey owns you. And that has certainly been my experience. In Cyprus, that's where I started out. And so I felt this slap in the face of like, whoa, all right, okay, I get it. This is not what I expected, But nevertheless, the stories are there. The mythology is there in surprising ways, and it jolts you awake as well by its sudden appearance. And perhaps that's what I will focus on in this little podcast, is those moments. Like when sunlight falls to the bottom of a well and you see something you don't usually see. It came to me first in the names. Just walking around, riding around in Cyprus, you see those mythical names: Poseidon, Zeus, Aphrodite, Hermes. They're everywhere in the strangest ways sometimes. The Hermes photocopy shop, hotels. So here you go. I was riding on the back of a motorcycle. My friend Michalis was giving me a ride. We went through the really touristy part of Cyprus there, of Limassol, where I was. And there was this just huge hotel, gigantic, mirror bright, probably 20 or 30 floors high. And it's the Poseidon Hotel. And so there you go. The sea god lives on. Is that a cynical device to attract tourists from Europe and America who know who Poseidon is and might be drawn to this hotel? Possibly so. But it also is a way in which these mythologies live, and they seem really to be here. At first, I was going to take photographs of some of these things and be like, oh, okay, there's another mythical name. But there were so many of them, it became ridiculous. You stay at a hotel, and your room is the Hestia room, goddess of the hearth. They're just everywhere. I met 3 teenagers one day in Cyprus. Their names were Electra, Orestes, and Erato. Erato, the muse of lyric poetry. Orestes, the son of Agamemnon and Clytemnestra. And Electra, the daughter of Agamemnon and Clytemnestra. I asked Michalis, I said, is that unusual to name your children with these mythological names? And he said, a little unusual, but not a lot. And that was my experience. It wasn't long on my trip before I met someone named Ariadne. So the names are there, and they sort of jolt you awake. They jolted me awake of like, oh, okay, well, there's a myth. There it is. And the stories live in the remains that are around, in the ruins. They live in the culture now, as far as I can see, and they live in the remains of the past. In Cyprus, I went to an amazing place. I went to Kourion, where there are Roman mosaics, and there was a mosaic there of a story that I tell. It was Achilles on Skyros, the island, when he is in disguise as a dancing girl. And there that mosaic was. It was not in a building. The building has been lost, destroyed, but there was sort of a roof over it to protect it from the elements. And it was not far from the sea. I mean, you could look down and see the ocean there. And it was very hot in the 80s Fahrenheit, and the sun was beating down, and there was that story. There was that story that I tell, and it lives in me, a story I like to tell. I enjoy telling. I told it in a bar in Ithaca. I've told it, numerous places. And there it is also in this mosaic about, 2,000 years old. Wow. So that was cool. And then I went to Thessaloniki, and that is the second largest city in Greece. An amazing city, brilliant, I want to say. Big, but not merciless, not huge, gigantic big, and just filled with life. I just had a lovely time there, a great time there. And there, as you walk through the streets, there are large cutaways in the ground. There's imagine a big street for pedestrians, but the center of this street is rectangular parks, which are cut away, and then the ground drops down like 10 or 20 feet. And at the bottom, there's grass, ancient ruins, security cameras, and cats. And around this sort of parkland are just, 1,000 stores and people running around and life, just busyness. This is like the center of town, like a million things are happening. But the ruins are there, these beautiful things. And that was very striking to me. In Thessaloniki, I told stories from the Odyssey. My friend, the storyteller Stella Tsingu, arranged a performance for me there. And that was a delight to tell that story, to give it life in that place, in that time. And then I went to Athens. And I stayed in the Exarchia neighborhood, which feels like it sounds to me. It's a neighborhood known for its political activism, and everything's very tight and closed in. The sidewalks are narrow, the streets are narrow, and the buildings are, 8 to 10 stories high, so relentlessly so. So it's different than like a canyon of skyscrapers in New York City. It's shorter buildings, relatively speaking, but close in. And so you get this feeling of the sky as being very small and thin, high above you. And those streets are filled with life again, just very busy with very cool things. I mean, this is a funky, hip neighborhood, I would say. Coffee shops everywhere, bookstores, record stores even, stores selling old video cassettes and DVDs of movies from way back, just everything around. I just kept seeing these really amazing, cool stores all around. And at night, 5 floors up, there I was in my little Airbnb place, and I would hear talk outside. There was a coffee shop on one end of the block, and I think one on the other side, and I would hear people just talking and gabbing. It wasn't music, it was just conversation, and it was loud. People were outside. This is, it's a warmer climate than the Northeast of America, where I'm from. So not cold and snowy in November, but in fact, sort of autumnal, we would say, in America. So people were outside, and this conversation just bouncing off the walls was almost enough to keep me awake. I mean, it was really loud. So that's the thing, and you notice that. I notice that. And then I think for a minute, and then I'm like, Athens, Plato, and Socrates. Socrates, philosopher number one, soul brother number one. Maybe not soul brother, but philosophy brother number one. And a man known for his talk. He taught others by speaking with them in conversation. He never wrote anything down. Plato did, but Socrates did not. Talk was the essential element, the magic by which he awakened the minds of those around him, and he provoked those around him. And there I was on the 5th floor, hearing the talk below me in that coffee shop. Well, would anybody go to the coffee shop and talk in America, in China? Maybe so. But maybe also it's something of the culture speaking, something of that many thousands of year old culture coming alive there. And maybe the way to understand Socrates is not simply to read his words as written down by Plato, but to go down to that coffee shop and to hear the hubbub, those conversations which to my ears and Northeastern American ears sound often like arguments, but aren't necessarily so. And of course, I was in a neighborhood, like I said, known for its political activism. I was handed a flyer by a young woman. I don't read Greek too well, but I puzzled out the beginning. It said, "The Capitalists," at the beginning of the headline on this flyer. I saw a young guy drive up on a motorcycle. He gets off the motorcycle with his helmet still on. He plasters a wall with a flyer for a demonstration. I saw police with those large plastic shields they use for riots every day in that neighborhood. I saw a big police bus, or several of them, large, black, dark, its engine always on, idling. I saw that bus in Exarchia every day. I heard a demonstration once while I was there, chanting in the streets. So, and then of course graffiti everywhere. That's something I've seen throughout Greece. So, in any case, that neighborhood of Exarchia seemed a neighborhood of provocation. Like, okay, we're going to provoke. We're going to do some activism. We're going to change things here. And that too is a thread running through the fabric of Greek culture. So it seems to me. Another wake-up call was the religious heritage of modern Greece, and honestly, just a lot of Greek history. For folks raised on Greek mythology who know that well, it's the modern nation of Greece, which is the mystery. The old times, okay, Zeus, Athena, Demeter, we got that. Heracles, we know about that. Plato, Socrates, throw them in there, right? Peloponnesian War, okay. But modern Greece, we draw a blank. We're like, what? We're clueless, to put it mildly. So the junta, the four generals who took over Greece from 1967 to 74, if I'm getting those dates right, and had a military dictatorship, I didn't know about that. I learned a little bit before I went, but still. And all of the Byzantine heritage, the Byzantine Empire, the Christian, the Orthodox Greek religion, that's just everywhere. That's also a wake-up call. I went to Meteora, that amazing place where there are monasteries on top of pillars of stone. And that was amazing. To go high up and to approach the heights of the sky, as happens so often in mythology. In the Iliad, in the Cypria, as I tell it. There's a wedding on Mount Pelion. There's Prometheus on his mountain. Zeus is always on a mountain. You go to the heights to contact the gods. And here are monasteries at the top of these pillars of stone, put high up. They were put there for protection, right? Protection from the world, which wanted to steal what they had. But perhaps also from spiritual longing. And one day I heard some goats in the hills there. And in Athens, too, I sought out the heights. I climbed a high hill there, and at the top there is a little chapel. So you go to the top, it's the highest hill in Athens, you can see everything around. You see just miles and miles of white buildings covering every available thing from where you're standing to the sea, a city of several million people. But the sun is out, it's like boom, the sun is just scouring the top of that hill. But there's a chapel there, and you go inside, and it's darkness, and it's gold gleaming in the darkness, and it's candles, and it's saints on the walls, looking out from their golden halos. A moment of quiet and introspection, a different kind of sky, perhaps, inside that little chapel. And then you step out, and there they all are. There are the millions of people. There are the visitors from Germany, Japan, Spain, Italy, all of us with our cameras, photographing the view, photographing ourselves against that huge backdrop of all of Athens and far off the sea. And so now I have come to the island of Ithaki, the legendary home of Odysseus himself. And just the other day, I was taken on a tour through the palace of Odysseus, or what many people think is the palace of Odysseus, by Adriana Erzegure of islandwalks.com, who lives here and leads walks regularly around this island. And she took me on a walk through that place and showed me some amazing things. There's a cistern there with stonework in the style of the Mycenaean age, so about 1500 BC. There is a hole in the ground there with a space below it. At first you might think it's a well, but it's not deep enough to be a well. It is wide, and it looks like it had a lid on it. There's a space carved into the rock around the hole where you can place a rectangular lid. A storehouse. This is a palace halfway up the side of a mountain, looking out at the sea. As Adriana pointed out, whoever lived there wanted to be safe from attack from the sea. Also, the stones there in the stonework are very large. This is not a single person. This isn't a farmer alone with his family building a house. This is someone who had the money and the power to hire others to do that work, or who had permanent servants and workers at his or her disposal to build these walls. There is a set of stairs there leading to a megaron, a great hall. Is this the house? Are those the stairs leading to the hallway of Odysseus, the great hall? Is this the place where he paused in his beggar's rags and noticed the dog beside the door? Argos, his dog, covered in fleas and in ticks, not well cared for. His dog amid the garbage, old and decrepit. Is this the spot where Odysseus knelt down, scratched his dog behind the ears, so that Argos, smelling him, remembered the joy of running through the forest with his master, wagged his tail, and then died? Is that hole in the ground the place where Penelope went to pull up the bow of Odysseus, to bring it to the main hall, and to declare that there would be a contest, and the winner of that contest would be the man she would marry? This place has for thousands of years been connected with Odysseus. Archaeologists have found offerings, we might say, little scraps of pottery and things written on them like Odysseus's or to Odysseus, which is the kind of thing you find in other places in Greece when someone makes an offering to a god or a hero of a story. So for quite a long time, people have believed this place to be connected with Odysseus and with his story. What do we want? What would satisfy us? If Telemachus just stepped out of a wall and said, "This is it. This is the palace. That's where my father did this. That's where my mother did that." Well, that would be astounding and impossible. What we have are these stones. As you walk through these ruins, You see the big, huge stones of the original palace, and then smaller stones by other folks, farmers and other folks who lived there afterwards. At the top, there is a Hellenic building, so the Hellenic times 300 BC to 30 BC about. And there's also a church and a farmhouse. The roof has fallen in. The farmhouse is a couple hundred years old. The church, well, who knows, older than that. The Hellenic building, over 2,000 years. And then there's the other stones in this site, predating all of that. And archaeologists have found remains and traces of human habitation there, going even further back to the late Stone Age. The archaeologist Janos Lolos sent me a paper that he wrote after his excavations of this site. And he talked about the way humans have been in this place for a long time. And Adriana showed me a place high up on the hill, a stone. And on this stone, there is the shape of a spear in the stone. And then 3 holes in the stone, little pits like bowls, a small, a medium, and a large. This looks like a blacksmith's workshop, someone working with metal. And she said that an archaeologist friend of hers believes this to be the place where you would make a spear. You would pour the metal into the rock, and then the end is sort of a knobby little thing, but then you'd take it out, and as it cooled, you would pound the end to make the point. Amazing. I sat there with her in the slight rain, looking at this shape in the stone. The storyteller Ben Haggerty has made the point that epic begins with metal. It's only when humans get their hands on metal and metal working that new kinds of life become possible and these big stories arise. Well, perhaps that's true. Certainly the Odyssey and the Iliad are filled with war, filled with many things that can only happen once you have a bronze spear. Because of those spears and those swords and those shields, the Iliad happens the way it does. And because of the Iliad, you have the Odyssey. And Odysseus journeying home back to a palace, which, if it was not this one, was something perhaps very like this one. Looking down at that stone, that's what I was thinking. Perhaps this is where it all began. In the forging of a spear. So those are some glimpses of my journey so far. Those are some things that I have learned. We set out on these journeys seeking one thing, but we are given something else. Surprises. We need that first dream to get us out the door. We need that first illusion. Oh, I'm going to Venice. Oh, I'm going to Beijing, Moscow. I'm going to Ithaki. And then you get there, and the real comes. And the dance of travel, perhaps, is to let go of that first vision and to see what is in front of you, and to dance and perhaps to sing between these two things. And it has been my pleasure over these last weeks to seek the story in these places, and often to find it here. Thank you for joining me. Thanks to all those who have supported my work through Patreon. That is what makes this podcast possible, so that these stories are freely available to many people. If you are able to join them, please do so. You can do that at patreon.com/storyjl. Patreon.com/storyjl. Thanks very much, and take care.